I do agree with you that morality in banking and integrity sounds like a very good idea. I do see some challenges. People are seeking lower tax rates in offshore environments. There are also issues about employee involvement and commitment when, for example, the chairman of the organisation is paid perhaps 300 times greater than the median wage, whereas they probably wouldn't claim to be 300 times more intelligent or harder working. Given the demands from some of your customers, as I think you hinted, for less than ethical behaviour from you, how can you cope with that?
But there are two things in there, tax and pay, right? I think the tax one, in a way I feel is more straightforward. If you live in a country, you work in a country, you pay the taxes. And you don't seek to minimise it, you pay your fair share of taxes. And I can say with some pride that that is HSBC's position. It's also my personal view. Pay is more difficult because I also agree that there are excesses of pay in some quarters. And I think that we as an industry would be very wise to listen to what people are saying in this area and to make moves ahead of being pushed to make moves in some areas.
I was taken by this pause that you said for us to reflect a bit. Do you find you use methods like that to get people to ask the question, what's the principle here in making decisions? How do you encourage them?
Okay. We create a very powerful yardstick by which people judge us by, and there are many areas where I'm well aware we're falling short. One of the tools that we are specifically deploying is what we're calling a 4Ps, which is a bit glib, but it says, right, when you're confronted with a decision, what's your first question? Is it within policy? Often that is the first question at the operating level in the bank. Is it within our policy? What's the second question? Well, is it profitable? Yeah, okay, right. We do those all of the time. Now, what principles are at play in this decision? Yeah? And then fourthly, how will people feel about this decision? And by giving this very simple framework, we are making people ask these questions, and I think it's, on the one hand, it is so difficult because if you're trying to train people to do it. On the other side, if you're just saying to people, well, what would you do if it was your brother? Oh, well, in that case, I'd talk to them, is normally the answer. And so by trying to liberate it, it hopefully is a bit easier, but we have put a few tools around to try and help.
I was very interested in your various ingredients on fear and greed. But if I may add another dimension to this, which is power and banking and bankers and power. If you contrast the banking crisis and the riots, after the riots, many young people were immediately, through the legal system, sent to prison. Why is it that after the banking crisis, which impacted many millions across Britain, not one single banker was sent to prison?
The point on power a couple of you have raised, and I think maybe that should be added to the list. I haven't really thought through that dynamic particularly. I mean, I'd be interested in some other views around it, because for sure it is a corrupting and negative influence and playing into the equation. There are those who think that bankers should be sent to prison because of it. I think what I'd always say is I would always appeal for differentiation. I think history teaches us many things about the dangers of stereotyping, of generalization, and of seeking punishment and retribution against populations grouped only by their occupation, race, religion, or any other factor. Shouldn't anyone who has a responsibility be held to account over that responsibility? Should it carry criminal liability? And as I say, why just banks? Do we think that bankers are less good people than other people? Do bankers love their children less than doctors or any other profession?
I'm very persuaded by the arguments you put forward so far tonight, particularly around staff retention, internal values and the ethos within the business. But actually thinking a bit broader and thinking about the competitive industry in which any business or any bank has to operate. What is the transference between the core values that are internal to your business and how you would actually then operate within a competitive industry?
It's a really, really interesting question, and I think I've been personally on quite a journey on this over time as well. And I think there are different kinds of competition, and there's one kind of competition which is the pursuit of victory, to beat your competitor, to do better than them. And what's the value that underpins that? Well, it's probably something in the area of pride or somewhere around there. And pride, often companies name pride as a value. Of course, pride is one of the 7 deadly sins. Success or excellence, and I think a lot of people do define excellence as a value. Personally, I think it's probably more of an outcome, but the outcome of a cocktail of values in the area of strength, determination, but also prudence, temperance, the discipline, etc., can ultimately lead to success. And I always find if I'm racing on a bike or whatever, and I'm thinking about the other guy, I'm not performing at my best. It's when you're focused on your own performance that you achieve your best performance. The easiest way to motivate people is let's go and beat those guys over there. But it can be quite a transient and destructive source of motivation if not carefully managed.
HSBC is an international bank. You have international experience. To your mind, are there certain nationalities that demonstrate greater integrity than others? What's your assessment, or have you thought about the level of integrity that we display here in the UK as a culture, and how would one think about addressing maybe some of the issues that might rise out of that?
The number one profession, according to Roger's research, is housewife. And from all his work and looking across the English-speaking world, the only correlation that he's really picked up that transcends what you would expect as cultural or barriers is gender, where the female of the species consistently demonstrates a higher ethic of care than their male counterparts.
What concrete changes are you going to make, or HSBC going to make? To what degree do you feel your industry has a responsibility? And I know that you didn't take a bailout specifically, but we did as taxpayers all over Europe and here, and through austerity now, have supported you, are supporting the industry. So you do actually have a responsibility. So what changes are you going to make? What changes do you feel should be made within the industry? Do you think a financial transaction tax should be at least looked at? And lastly, I suppose, you're talking about integrity a lot. I think one of the first things about integrity is that you have to take responsibility.
I certainly wasn't trying to say that we are not responsible. Like I said, we're absolutely responsible as people working in financial services, and I wouldn't try and in fact, it would run against, I think, the thrust of what I'm trying to say to try and attribute blame either elsewhere or even really at all. What are we trying to do about it? Well, we are trying to do things about it. I guess there are levels to it, and I think if you ask me what's the one thing that I'm personally trying to do to make a difference, it's engage with those who've got very different points of view in the spirit of trying to build a productive dialogue that in turn will lead to actions that take us to a better place.